Magic music. That sounds like romper room. And I can see Bobby and George. Well, I never really liked it. I was a Captain Kangaroo fan. Sounds like romper room. Well, thank you. The world will always know that I'm. So we're set?
So we are.
Good, okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Independence City Council meeting. It's Tuesday, January 24th, 2023 at 6:30 in the evening. The fog is thick and it's cold outside. But records show that the council members are all here and happy. Council members, you have the minutes of the January 10th meeting in your packet, and do they meet with your approval? That was a question.
I move to accept the minutes as written.
Second.
I have a motion second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Any public comment? I don't see anybody stepping to the microphone. I'm going to go to my report. In your packet, you have a museum board appointment. And can I have a motion, please?
I move to approve Joe Martinez for appointment to the museum board.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second by Kate Schwartzler. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Under my report, I have a couple things just keep you informed. Had the pleasure of attending the Senator Wyden Town Hall over in Monmouth last Saturday. Was part of the presentation. Had a chance to visit with the senator briefly, and I know a couple councilors were also there. Want to remind everybody that the Council of Governments annual dinner is taking place on February 15th. I think our city recorder has sent you out opportunities to register. The city will cover your dinner expense. I hope that you will consider attending. Today, I, along with our city manager, attended the LOC Board of Directors meeting. It was held today in Detroit, and it was a real statement about mayors from around the state and councilors and city managers for the board meeting going up to Detroit and hearing about what they've done to recover, and the spirit of optimism and resiliency was outstanding. And tomorrow is City Hall Day at the Capitol. And so there was some legislative conversation back and forth, and something that I heard today that was very encouraging. The LOC lobby staff was talking about how tomorrow at the City Hall Day, we're going to have the governor and all the leadership from both the House, the Senate, the Republicans, and the Democrats will all be speaking to us. And one of the things that the lobby staff was talking about is that everybody is talking about and on very similar pages dealing with homelessness and housing for people around the state. Both parties, both chambers, there is a feeling of seriousness and of getting some things done. At City Hall Day tomorrow, there will be 230 people attending, city managers, mayors, and city council members from around the state. There'll be 80 cities represented. I know Councilor Schwartzler and Councilor Roden and I will be attending along with City Manager West. And so we'll be talking with our, both with our senator and our representative and talking to them. And I'll be also joining some others, as I know our city manager will be with talking with some other legislators as part of the team. We'll be emphasizing infrastructure. And that's both a focus point for our community and also cities around the state. And finally, just to let you know, we got through Oregon Emergency Management today, notification that it's going to be really, really cold this weekend. And in the first days, Monday, Tuesday of next week. So just letting folks know, it's going to be very cold. There might be a very small dusting of snow, but they want us to just let folks know that it's cold. So turn your taps on drip. That's the end of my report. And let's go to council liaison reports. Councilor Morton, you get both library and museum today.
I do, and I'm just going to do them 1, 2, if that's all right,
Please.
without any introduction between. The library continues to be a very busy place. The programs are attractively advertised on the reader board in front of the library, which is looking very good, by the way. And these programs are reported as being very fun and engaging. According to reports delivered by our library director, they are also very well attended and growing. The old library at 311 Monmouth Street falls under the auspices of the Independence Library and is used as a site for overflow and book sales. These sales are conducted by the Friends of the Library, the nonprofit fundraising arm of that supports our library. Book sales are held there on the first Saturday of each quarter, and I'm pleased to report that the January book sale raised almost $700 for the library in one day. One other thing about the library is that Independence as a zip code now qualifies for the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. And what that does is you sign up your child who is between age birth and 5, and when they get signed up, they get a free book sent to them every month until they reach age 5. If there are 2 kids in the family, let's say one is 4 and one is 2, each child gets a book. By the time the 2-year-old gets to the age of the 4-year-old was, when that 2-year-old reaches age 4, they don't get the same book. They monitor what goes to what household so that every book for each child is different and the library is completely varied in the household. And this is a free service to the kids. We are Independence qualified as a complete zip code. Monmouth is still working on it, but hope that will come soon. On the museum board, the Heritage Museum is a very active place that logs hundreds of visitors every month. Estimates, and I just checked on this yesterday, indicate that in just 1 month at our new museum, there are more visitors than were recorded in an entire year at the location on 3rd Street. The museum board membership has been expanded. We just did that tonight, added 1 more person, as has the Heritage Museum Society, and that is the nonprofit fundraising arm that supports our museum. School groups are frequent visitors at Heritage Museum, and volunteers are tapped to help with these events. At least 4 groups have been scheduled already for January. One group brought over 50 students, and they go through the displays and totally enjoyed everything. The museum also hosts exhibits provided by the Oregon Historical Society. We have one in our lobby out here, and fresh displays are scheduled at least through the end of 2023 and far into 2024. That's it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Councilor Kaur, would you like to give us an update on the regional homeless?
Sure. As I've notified this group before, the annual requirement from HUD to do a pit count began today with the Connect event in Dallas. I was there from 9:30 till about 4:30 today. By 10:30, we had already counted more than half that was counted in the entire rural count last year. But what was more important, I think, was the vast majority of people who came were not homeless, but in dire need. So there were plenty of service providers there to help them out. DHS was there, OHA was there to connect them with support. Ton of providers. Joanne from C Street Salon was there giving free haircuts. There were people there to repair bikes. Lots of people took opportunities to get their bikes fixed. And OHSU sent a contingent of nurses down to do health screenings. So it was a great benefit for them. It's a good teaching opportunity for them, learning opportunity for them. Street outreach begins tomorrow in Independence and Monmouth. We are not doing Saturday like Salem is because we don't really have the need. Pit count here, the pit count here tomorrow in Independence is going to be headquartered at the Brew. Starts at about 9 o'clock tomorrow. And we're expected to have 2 shifts in the morning, 2 shifts in the afternoon. But we're hoping that we've pretty much captured just about everybody at the Connect event. I did speak to one individual who was from Independence. Most of the people I surveyed were from Dallas. But one of the things that I found pretty heartwarming is just about everybody I spoke to, and I surveyed probably about 12 or 15 people, each and every one of them had deep roots in the community that they lived in. So I think that's good information for us to know, good information is to have going forward. So hoping that, this is a great start to the pit count, and it looks like we're going to continue to do the Connect event every year because it's a great way to not just reach out and count homeless, but to take care of people in our community who are on the verge.
Thank you, Counselor.
Yep.
Appreciate your efforts on that. Wes, to you. Yay.
Okay, so my normal, I'm going to welcome everybody on Zoom and those folks who are joining us in person. We appreciate you being here, and we love to have our community here with us. For those who are new to Zoom or who are watching and haven't watched us before, this is kind of the way our meeting works. The mayor runs the meeting. That's one of the duties you elected him to perform. He'll announce the agenda item. A staff member will provide a summary of the issues relating to that item. Council will then ask questions of our staff. Once the council questions have been answered, there may be some discussion and a motion will be made and then a second to the motion. After that, there may be more discussion or not, depending on the issue and the interest by the council. Then a vote of the council and on to the next agenda. I always like to say this isn't what you might see on drama TV. What you're going to see is a wonderful council working together, doing the business of the city. And I always like to say it's an honor to work with this council for your professionalism and your ability to work together for the betterment of the community. Tonight, after the city council meeting, we have 2 work sessions. These will be held downstairs in the event center, and you are invited, those of us who are here, to come down with us. These are informative meetings for the council and for any invited committee members. One of them, the planning commission, will be there. Generally, the community members, the public don't have an opportunity to interact. It is just informational for the council and committee members. The 2 work sessions tonight are the wastewater rate update and the housing needs analysis. And that will be Public Works Director Fisher and our planner, Fred Evander, who's going to be here talking about something else. I do have a couple of things that I think our community might be interested in. So I'll take just a few more minutes, Mayor, if I may.
Please.
This weekend, our IT director rolled out some additional email security measures for the city. We all know cybersecurity is an issue, and our IT director keeps us really on the cusp. So everything that we do is safe. Everything that you do is safe. It's safe for our community to interact with us. As of January, the transfer of liaison responsibilities for the Parks Committee were transferred to Tammy Rumminger in Public Works. Tammy has a significant background in parks, and as a city supervisor, public works supervisor, she's a perfect match for our parks. It is her passion, and I like to match passion to committee. We get a lot of work done and good work done that way. We were contacted by ODOT regarding the installation of audible signals for the sight impaired at the intersection of OR 51 and 16th Street. These audible signals will be purchased and installed by ODOT crews. Our Public Works Department will coordinate with ODOT. That is an ODOT controlled roadway. We really don't have anything to say about it, other than, it's a great thing for those who are sight impaired to have that audible so they can cross safely. My Trolley website is live, and you can find that at www.mitrolley.org. That is a passion of Fred's, and he'll talk a little bit more about it later tonight. The Love Local Scratchets are back, and we're excited by that. For more information on that, go to Experience Indie Oregon website. And then the first Marking Monday was held yesterday. Today's Tuesday. Yesterday, we had 40 people registered. I heard that we actually had, I think it was 10 more than what were registered. So I think this is going to be a great program for our businesses. And then we had 100 people come for the Bike Indie hot chocolate ride last Saturday, even though we had rain and cold. And there was a great distribution of people from throughout the Mid-Valley, including a few first-timers to Independence. So that's what I thought our community might be interested in tonight.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, moving promptly forward. Mr. Evander, the trolley, our intergovernmental arrangement.
Where's your trolley?
Oh, I'm sorry, I bypassed. Oh, I'm in serious hot water now. I forgot the city recorder. I didn't forget. My eyes Can you save me? This is our, the staff department report, and obviously Karen Johnson, our city recorder. Karen, I apologize for walking past you there, and welcome to council.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councilors. I won't have a PowerPoint for you, but I will have some little things to show you in a bit. So I'd like to give you a little bit of introduction about the city recorder position. It was the first appointed position for the city, established in the charter for the town of Independence in 1874, and again in a new charter in 1878. Primary responsibilities have not changed much: to be the clerk to the council, take official record of meetings, maintain records, administer oath of office, etc. But what has changed dramatically is the way these things happen, starting by taking minutes by hand, then rewriting them into an official ledger book. Eventually, typewriters were on the scene, and you could save the information on an 8.5-inch floppy disk. And then on a 5.5-inch floppy disk. And then on a 3.5-inch floppy disk. And then on a CD. And now on a thumb drive and to the cloud. So considering how few of these can still be accessed, I'm not really sure that other than the thumb drive, if we could access any of that, and those are all city drives. Paper is still a valuable option for storing permanent records. After all, the Gutenberg Bible was mass produced in the 1450s, 158 copies, and 49 copies are still known to exist to this day. And although strictly not paper, another intact papyrus scroll was recently discovered in Egypt, and it was 16 meters long and was completely legible. Other scrolls found in the same location date back to 1475 BC. So why do I bring this up? So I have brought for your viewing pleasure these ledger books that contain the first ordinances and minutes of the town of Independence. So here's the conundrum. Although paper can be valuable for retention, in this day and age, it's not quite as convenient as digital records for availability and accessibility. Is there perhaps some sort of compromise? In reality, there are very few city records that are deemed permanent: minutes, ordinances, resolutions, and some legal documents like deeds and easements. One of the projects I would like to see is the conversion of all city records to digital versions, and then have a repository, whether it's the city website or somewhere else, where anyone could look up and review these records at their convenience. Maybe even have a kiosk at City Hall and/or the library for those without the needed hardware at home. I was fortunate to have the services of an intern for a few weeks this last summer who began scanning some ordinances and minutes. Approximately 500 documents have been scanned, and I'm in the process of saving them on a city drive for future accessibility. There are companies such as Laserfish and ORMS, that's through the state archives, that help better manage information and records in the public trust. And you'll hear from me more on this at a later date, around some budget time, maybe not this year, but maybe next year. So what does a city recorder do? My official duties are clerk of the council, records officer and custodian of the city seal, elections officer, and management of legal instruments such as charter, ordinances, and resolutions. Other duties as may be assigned: clerk to the Planning Commission, Historic Preservation Commission, Traffic Safety Commission, and Independence Days Commission. And I do an agenda and notice management for all city boards and committees. I maintain the city lien docket. And so with that in mind, for the period July 1 through December 31st of last year, the last 6 months, I prepared agenda packets and set up Zoom meetings and attended after hours meetings and official minutes for a total of 42 agenda packets and 25 after hours meetings. I prepared 8 ordinances, 7 resolutions, and 2 proclamations. There were 14 formal public records requests, but I didn't count the informal ones, like when somebody will just call, "Hey, Karen, can you send me a copy of this?" Sure, right there, I also do oversight of local elections for candidates and measures. Some of my miscellaneous duties are tracking boards and commissions, members and terms, assigning street addresses. I get to determine those. I help the finance department review their finance documents at the end of each month. I reserve all the meeting rooms and have to figure out how to work through the hotel reservation program so I could reserve the event center. And some of my outside activities. I represent cities on the Oregon Sunshine Committee. I was appointed in January of 2018. This committee does review of Oregon public records exemptions, of which there are 500 plus. Meetings are held every other month. And for the period of July through December, we reviewed health information exemptions and law enforcement exemptions. I'm also the city representative to the Chamber Board. So I attend those monthly meetings and ribbon cuttings and all that other stuff. And on there, I'm also the chair of the Finance and Governance Subcommittee. I'm a member of Rotary, where I am a membership chair and the rum cake fundraiser co-chair. So if you haven't bought any rum cakes, we still have a few left. And currently I am the president of the Oregon Association of Municipal Recorders. I preside over a 12-member board and have oversight of 18 committees. Our membership passed, and now the board is beginning the implementation of our first strategic plan. I'm overseeing the planning for the 2023 conference, which this year will be held at Spirit Mountain Lodge. I'm very excited about that. And then I will represent Oregon at the International Conference in May in Minneapolis. And I represent Oregon at the neighboring states conferences. In Alaska, I attended the first week in December. I missed my flight home from Anchorage due to overnight snowfall. They had 10.5 inches fall overnight. The planes were on time, believe it or not, but the taxi took 1.5 hours to get to my hotel, so I missed my flight. The Washington Municipal Clerks Conference will be in March and California Clerks Conference in April. So that's just a little bit of what I've been up to lately. So let me know if you have any questions and how can I help you?
We need a proclamation that you can never retire.
So I'm going to add, because I've had the pleasure with working with our city recorder for quite some time, and when she talks about being involved in other kinds of things, as she mentioned, she's the current president of the Oregon City Municipal Recorders Association. This is her second go with that, is that they brought her back because one, she's good and she knows what she's doing. She's also a mentor to a number of city recorders around the state. She's helped a number of city managers and a number of mayors in lots of different ways, both a lot of times quietly behind the scenes. She's not a person who gets up and takes a bow. She lets everybody else do it. But I just want to let you know that in spite of the fact that I walked right past your presentation and put my foot in my mouth, but really appreciate the work that you have done and that you continue to do. And I got to tell you, those records she talks about, those handwritten records, lest you think that those are museum pieces, this council has had to use those records from the late 1800s on several occasions to looking things up. So anyway, thank you very much for your presentation today. It's great to work with you.
And I will have these books here. I've got a couple more. So if you want to look at them afterwards, I've got them here for you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, now we're going to go to Mr. Evander to talk about the trolley IGA. Good evening.
Good evening.
Brad,
It's great to be here. What this is all about,
where's the trolley hat?
where's the
Gotta-
trolley hat? I
gotta
don't
get
have a
trolley
trolley hat. I also don't have a trolley tie, which is a complete shame, isn't it? So what this is about is this before you is an intergovernmental agreement between us, Monmouth, and Chariots to run and operate the trolley. Basically, it doesn't commit the city to any financial obligations. Really, a bunch of the branding has already been done. Some of the stuff that it mentions in there has already been done. Basically, I mean, this idea is an old one. It's like Back to the Future, right? Way back when the city of Independence and the city of Monmouth had a little locomotive that went between the two communities. And this sort of looks at that and says, hey, what if we took a similar idea and we brought it back to the future, right? We conducted a feasibility analysis for this in 2019. That feasibility analysis really looked at a gamut of vehicles. We looked at a gamut of routes, trying to figure out how do we run this thing well. We did a whole bunch of surveying, and all of that stuff came back with, yes, let's operate a trolley vehicle. Let's operate it fast between key points in the community, primarily down Monmouth Street, 51, just so we can hit all of these key destinations and run it from downtown Independence to downtown Monmouth and Western Oregon University. That's the idea. We anticipate the thing is going to run approximately every 20 minutes, but it will have the opportunity to deviate off route for certain trips if folks call in advance and request a ride. So it really does provide that sort of combination of reliability that is fundamental for transit, but also a degree of flexibility to really help some of our mobility impaired residents get around. We see this as a great opportunity to enhance economic development, to bring some Western Oregon students to downtown Independence, to connect the hotel with what's going on over there. Not only that, we see it as a great opportunity to offer folks some different ways to get around. I see a lot of kids walking up and down the highway to get to school and the gate and all of that stuff. And this offers an opportunity for kids instead to hop on the trolley and get to wherever they need to go. So that being said, we did get an appropriation from the state legislature in 2021. We have been working with Monmouth and Chariots since that time to try and figure out how to get this thing off the ground. And we are getting very close to actually having it operational. Part of our delay to this point is we've been waiting for trolleys. All three are now in the community. And we are anticipating a launch date of early March at this point. Monmouth is a fiscal agent for the project, and what this intergovernmental agreement sort of commits us to is to continue to work together, which we have every intention of doing. So I think that's pretty much it. Are there any questions?
Questions for the presenter, please, Counselor Joe.
I have a couple. Okay, so you said Independence has no financial obligation, right? So we're not paying for fuel, we're not paying for insurance, we're nothing. It's covered by Chariot, is that right?
Yeah, so how it works is Monmouth is the fiscal agent for the project. They are essentially contracting with Chariots for essentially the operation of the service. So, and then that cost includes fuel, it includes maintenance of the vehicles up to a certain extent, except major repairs, stuff like that. Yep.
Okay, so Chariots is paying for it, not Monmouth, not Independence. Chariots is paying for it.
No, we are, the grant funds, the grant is going through the city of Monmouth to fund,
Okay.
to pay for Chariots.
Okay, I thought the grant just covered the 3 trolleys. So the grant is going to cover all the operations for 2 years.
2 years.
Okay. Question, because you said about the kids hopping on. Are there going to be any age requirements for kids riding alone without adult supervision?
We hadn't talked about that.
Could like a first grader hop on? Or
I don't think, I don't know. We hadn't talked about that. That's a good question.
Okay. And then traffic.
Yeah.
There's about 11 stops each way.
Yeah.
Is the trolley small enough that when they pull over to pick up or drop off, traffic can keep flowing, or are we going to be stopping at each of the stops if you're lucky enough to get behind the trolley?
There is a center turn lane by the vast majority of the stops. So yeah, what I anticipate at least is that the trolley vehicle will be able to pull over and cars will be able to go around as necessary.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
One last question. What's the fare to ride the trolley?
The trolley is going to be free at least for, I'd say the first year of service.
Okay.
This is really a feasibility project to see if the idea even works.
Counselor Roden.
So on page 5, it says that the passenger fare will be considered, so funding for local businesses will be considered operation beyond the 2-year pilot. So is it 2 years that people aren't going to pay for it? And how do we encourage people to pay for it in the future if we're all used to just hopping on for free now?
It's a good question. So what we'd like to see is we'd like to understand what the ridership is. There are a number of transportation resources currently being used in the community that potentially we think could be better utilized. We would like to see if folks utilize this service and then potentially make the case that some of those other transportation resources could be better spent on this service, just in terms of ridership. My goal is to keep it cheap or free for the foreseeable future. Yeah.
Counselor Cour.
Where are they being stored when they're not in use?
Over at either, is it Monmouth Power and Light?
Okay. I had another that just went right out of my.
Or no,
Oh.
Monmouth Public Works.
Non-public works, the
Yeah.
S-curves.
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, one of the selling points here is it can relieve some of the parking issues we have downtown. People ride it instead of driving their car downtown. I mean, that's certainly why I'm gonna hop on it.
That's definitely a goal. Absolutely.
One more question.
Go ahead, Counselor Court. Counselor Roden, excuse me.
There's no stop at Winco or Ross, is that right?
The closest stop, there is a stop at Ross. There is currently a Chariots Route 45 and 40X stop. It's just a 45. Wait, it's just a 45 stop. The 40X doesn't stop there. It's at the S-curves right in front of the Lutheran Church.
Yeah, I see.
There is not one directly in front of Winco. The closest one to that is the existing 45 stop at 16th Street.
Counselor Schwartz.
Question, if Chariots is going to be operating it, I would assume that we would use their ridership rules. So my question is, would Independence and Monmouth have to come up with their own rules, or would we be adopting the rules that Chariot already has in place?
We are relying a lot on Chariot's protocol, yes.
So they might have something that
They might
addresses
have
the
something
age.
like that.
It would be great, though, that if we could keep it open to kids so that kids can easily hop on and get to wherever they need to get in the community without, I mean, to safely do it, but not over-regulate it so that kids don't feel like they have the empowerment to do so.
Right.
Great. Additional questions? If not, this is an action item, please. Page 14.
I move that the council approve the intergovernmental agreement between the city of Monmouth, the city of Independence, and the Salem Area Mass Transit District, and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement on behalf of the city of Independence.
Second.
I have a motion second by Martin Willis. Is there further discussion? I'll just say it's exciting. There's been a lot of work over many years to put this together. And I think that this has a huge potential. And I liked your comments about efficiency and consolidation of operations. Because I know I was talking with the Chariots folks, and there's lots of opportunity there, I think. And we're all growing up. So all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Before we go to the work session downstairs, are there announcements that people need to make? If I hear no, I can't even speak this evening. Without any announcements, let's adjourn and get started at 1/4 after. Seem reasonable to everybody?
Yep.
Okay, downstairs in the event center, for our work sessions. We're in recess.
Look at the dates on the bottom. Look at the dates, look at the years. Correct. I was so stupid, I called him today, I said, Father, forgive me, I have been goofed up.
Just editing that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's what I'm gonna do.
That means you're gonna have to do it.
Penn State, you know?
Penn State forms
Yeah.
and three federals.
Yeah.
That's true. And these are replacements. Slide.
Still kind of like.
Okay, we're all here and
I'm still having challenges over here, sorry.
okay, Boomer.
Yeah, well, when you have to go from one to another, the same one, and it's not working the same way it did when we practiced. It's not kicking this off. Like it's supposed to be. When I signed in earlier today, it kicked the one upstairs off. But now it's not doing it when I signed in. You're gonna have to handwrite things tonight.
Going old school.
Karen, we can go get you that ledger.
Yeah, right. Actually, it would just be easy to run upstairs and turn on. Hopefully not. Okay.
All right, we're just gonna hang out here till we get everything lined up. So anybody, so if folks want to watch this later, they can, or listen in or whatever. So enjoy visiting amongst yourself.
That's not true, don't this.
Hey, I got it.
You've been there.
I got it.
Okay.
Okay.
Here, you can sing.
Uh,
No, I'm not making that.
me singing is a summer camp activity where you have 200 kids. And okay, and they're all in a line.
Now,
And-
he is an expert.
No, it's one of the reasons.
Here he comes.
Yeah.
Get ready, James.
He's got it.
I have some. good art.
Oh,
I'll try to mine.
I'll give you some. Because. Then I don't have to. Yeah, well, you know. Well. Don't have to agree.
I know.
Okay.
Oh, no, I need this to be able to get through.
And now you can.
The marketplace basketball. They're usually about, they're usually 180 to 240 playing high school basketball, they're 6'2". And so, he would be really good at setting screens. And they fall down. And it was just, you know, it's just because he got used to playing against yours truly in the driveway. And so, you know, people try to push it. It's only 220 pounds, that's 300, that's easy.
Talking about you last night. Yes. About how you had to overcome the.
Okay, we are live, Mr. Mayor.
And my kids just thinking about it, all the opportunity given them because of the people I do. After you work so hard, and that's just life.
Yeah, so anyway.
So you're part of a dinner, whether you wanted to be or not.
Okay, we're gonna get started so that we don't have to stay here all evening. And tonight, the first work session tonight is our sewer rate update, and Fisher, our Public Works Director, is gonna lead us in that and provide us information so that we can make decisions at a later date, but this is an information presentation and you got it, Coach. I didn't go through that just without people on. We're just waiting for the PowerPoint. Oh, okay.
This is the one that you can use in the. It takes 3 turns to get it in. No. Right.
So I do that. Again, so you're important and stuff. So the whole story. Very active.
In the office. It's 22.
Yeah.
Celebration of energy. Maybe something for citizens. She comes to me and I'll give it to you. He has to move back. We want to be on the system.
Okay, slideshow up, take 1. So this is the 2023 wastewater rate study presentation. Steve Donovan is with me this evening from Donovan Enterprises. And he's worked with us through the system development charge update for wastewater and in rates. Because remember at the beginning, I said we had to do the master plan, then we do the SDCs, and out of that falls the rates. So we got the first two done. Steve and I have been able to do the rest of the work to get the proposed rates put together for the upcoming year. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So real quick agenda, we did introductions. I'm going to do an overview of the 5-year wastewater capital improvement plan projects from the 2022 master plan, the financial analysis and funding capacity of the city, and then I'm going to hand it off to Steve to talk about the rate analysis and neighboring community monthly billings. One important thing to note about neighboring community, when you're talking about utility rates, or you're talking about SDCs, it's not apples to apples. Each city has its own unique challenges. Each city has done different levels of investment in their different infrastructures. So while the numbers, you might say a city has 10,000 like we do, they may have spent more money on wastewater and not enough on transportation, or maybe we spent more on transportation and not enough on wastewater. So you have to remember that when we talk about SDCs, it's not apples and apples, but it gives you kind of a basis or comparison about what everybody else is doing out there. Because if you watch them over time, you'll see their rates go up and their SDCs change as they do updated master plans. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So we'll be finishing up the work on our CWSRF loan. That's the projects that rebuilt the Riverview pump station, the effluent pump station, and the 9th Street pump station. Total debt we've got right now is about $7.3 million. And we'll have at the end of it, when we close it out, we'll get a $500,000 in principal forgiveness, which will set the balance at about just under 6.8 million. Those payments will start in next fiscal year. We recently applied for a CWSRF loan for a total of 10 million for the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. So we did pump station upgrades. Now we're doing the treatment plant. And we've actually gone through the review, made all the edits and changes based on their updated form, and it's actually sitting with the other applicants. We have had DEQ violations in the past that were related to recycled water. We didn't recycle water, so we had to hold it. And when we got too much coming in because of I&I, we would discharge out of season to the river. In the summertime, we aren't supposed to be discharging, but we couldn't hold water, so we let some go. The recycled water project now sprays that water on a farm to the north of us. So we're able to get rid of that extra water without discharging to the river. So that eliminates all of those potential for future violations. We do have high inflow and infiltration. Everybody does in Oregon. We all have old sewer systems. Infiltration is water coming in through the pipes underground. Inflow is stuff like connections from rain drains in an old system where the sewer came out of the house and they also connected the rain drains. That's just what they did back in the day. Now we have separated systems in all new houses. So we still have some that are connected, and we'll methodically go through and disconnect those, make them go to the swing system. Go ahead. We completed the wastewater plan and got DEQ approval in February 2022. That master plan noted treatment plant issues related to effluent, BOD, that's biochemical oxygen demand, and TSS, which is total suspended solids. We had capacity issues at the headworks. They're too small and they're unscreened, so whatever comes in just gets dumped in the ponds. And we have age-related issues where various elements of the treatment plant are in poor condition just due to normal aging. Plant's been around for a long time. High priority treatment plant projects totals 11.51 million. The headworks, a majority of it is in the lagoon aeration, which is the last piece of it. But we have headworks at 1.38, lagoons biosolids removal 4.14, and then the aeration at 5.99. The biosolids is to remove what's in there. The headworks is to screen off stuff so that we're trying to get rid of the solids and just treat the water. And the aeration is an improved process that will better treat the water and have, as we start growing even more, we'll have more water coming in. That aeration will help the biology of the plant do what it's supposed to do to break down the BOD and TSS. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So the numbers here, it's heavily weighted in SRF loan and SBCs, the green area. The state grant, that's the capital improvement cost for the project. We actually got 2 million in that. But if you think about inflation, by the time we get it built, it's probably going to be the full 2 million of that grant. And the rest of it is cash and future rates.
Keep an eye on that $10 million. We're gonna play with that in the next couple of slides. I want to talk to you about that. Loans and SDCs.
So since we got here, we made a lot of changes, especially over the past year. I've done a lot of restructuring in public works, and with Gloria's help, prior city manager and Kent's help, we restructured how we do the budget. And now we're doing direct allocations. You heard about that at the last budget committee meeting and when we passed the last budget. But now we're directly charging the actual personnel and other departments to public works. And what it does is it eliminates needs for these transfers. You really don't know what they're going for, and it allows for better transparency. So we now know we can backtrack, and there's breadcrumbs. We can figure out where the money is going and where it's coming from. We did additional transparency through detailed line items. There were some things that were kind of grouped together, and so I actually broke them apart so we know how much we're going to spend at the lift stations, how much we're spending on the treatment plants, how much we're spending on the sewer collection system. So, and the sewer fund debt includes share of the city's facilities for the 2013 sewer refunding bond and the one that we're finishing up right now, the CWSRF. Budget assumes all of the existing capital towards treatment plant improvements, biosolid removal, and the C Street sewer replacement, which all of those are underway or getting ready to get underway. SDCs, this is an important part. They'll play a critical role in the funding, but what we're assuming is no SDCs are coming in. It's the conservative approach. You build it, you take out the debt, and then all growth stops. Okay, so how are you going to pay for the debt? So we're assuming no SDCs are coming in. The SDCs that do come in as we're building those projects, we use those SDCs to pay the cost of the project. So I don't have to ask for money to be drawn on those loans. The intent is that $10 million loan, we're not actually going to take out 10 million. If we get the SDCs in, we'll take away and lower that down to try to keep that debt as low as possible. I'm doing that right now with the CWSRF loan for 2017. We have money in that loan to pay for the 9th Street pump station. I'm trying to pay cash for it. So you don't have to pay debt for the next 20 years on that lift station. So that's about it.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'll take it up from here. Want to talk to you now about, now that we've got the launch pad, and you can see what's really driving the bus here is that capital plan, right? I mean, that's $15 million over 5 years. 11.3 million of that is those critical projects. So that's really the driver of how do we fund that, and then when we do take out debt, how does that impact rates? So what we're talking about here for the forecast, and I want to really, you guys, all of you, we're here in October. we got slapped around pretty hard by the development community about the SDCs, because we did a big increase on the SDCs. And you had a lot of pushback. And I'm really proud of you. Now I want to show you the fruit of what that does to your ratepayers. So what we're talking about here is for the forecast. Gerald talked about $10 million SRF loan that we've got the application for. For modeling purposes, we've broken it out into 2 loans, one in fiscal 25 and one in fiscal 27. Whole point of this is now we're doing a 5-year forecast. Your utilities are doing business plans. Think of this as a business plan, a 5-year plan to get this done. Because if we all try to do it at once, it's simply unattainable. It's simply untenable. Kenna is very, very behind us on this and having a business plan and running these like businesses. So we're anticipating that we take out 20-year loans. If Gerald has the cash that comes in the door, he won't borrow. But if he doesn't have it, we'll borrow. I want to show you here, as you can see, of the total borrowing, that 11.3 million that Gerald talked about, 2 million of that is coming from SDCs that either you have on hand or we're going to get in a very conservative approach. He's only assuming 10 houses are going to be built per year, every year for the next 5 years. So it's a very conservative estimate, given the fact that you've done 40, 50 a year in this last couple of years.
Yeah, it's probably about 20 so far this year.
So this slice here is such a critical component. And we talked to you about that in October. We said, this is a critical component. Your ratepayers do not support growth. Growth pays for growth. And that's what we're seeing here. And go ahead to the next slide. Now, here are the 2 loans, 25 and 27. Gerald talked about we use all the SDCs we can when we need it. In 2025, we're going to have a $4.4 million need for capital projects. Almost half of that is being bought down with SDCs in that year. So we're only going to be borrowing 2.8 million. Think about that from a ratepayer's perspective. Rather than borrowing almost 4.5, you're borrowing 2.8. So we really pushed down the lid on the rate profile. And it's all because of you guys giving us that SDC increase so that growth paid for growth based on the master plan. So I'm really, really, really proud of it. And then in 2027, since we don't have a lot of new SDCs coming in the door and we've used as much as we could here, we don't have as much left over, but we still have a big need. So here's the 2027, we're going to be borrowing the second part. So here's roughly that $10 million that Gerald was talking about. If you don't need it, you won't borrow it. And that's the nice thing about the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Program. It's an open line of credit and you don't get a commitment fee against it. Go ahead.
Before we get too deep into the math, you're gonna lose me. You're taking out a loan, but you're not gonna use it. What's going on with the interest rate associated with that?
There's the beauty. And I mean, Kenna, she's an artist with this at her prior city. This program, the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Program, which is administered by the DEQ, but is funded from the EPA as part of the Clean Water Act. It really, really is skewed toward communities like you to help. It's like a line of credit. It is a line of credit. But instead of having a commitment fee on that line of credit where you got to pay because you the bank's committed the money to you, you don't pay unless you draw on it. So it's really, really probably one of the best programs in terms of environmental development that I've ever worked with. Go ahead, Karen.
I have one question.
Oh,
So on that last slide, you're really anticipating a drop in development in that 25 to 27, right?
yeah. Well, right today, we're for our 23, 24, 25. And I think he's got rocks in his head, but
Even though the governor now has mandated how many homes will be built in the state.
Well, there's a lot of things, and Steve and I have been talking about.
well, he's been pounding me up on it.
There's a lot of things that we don't have control of, okay, from a local agency standpoint. We don't have control of the Fed. They could raise the interest rates up to 9%, okay? What's that going to do to the economy and housing and building? We don't have control over the supply chain. There's been a lot of problems with that. We don't have control over pandemics and having workforce. There's been a lot of stuff going on with that. There are a whole bunch of things that we don't have control of. So the assumption is with all of these things happening, and we've already started to see a downturn. It hasn't dropped, but we've seen a downturn. You take the assumption that the downturn is going to continue and you do this rate profile, you're always going to be in a good financial position to pay your debt. If you don't, if you assume, oh, it's just going to keep going and we're going to keep building houses and all these SDCs are coming in, and then all of a sudden they don't come in and you don't have your rates in place to cover that, you're going to get creamed.
Well, we're gonna come back for rate increases.
Yeah.
And that's gonna be embarrassing.
Councilor Roden.
Is the money you have a line item for systems contributions from SBCs, have we already collected that money?
Good portion of it you have. You've got over $1 million in the bank right now from STCs.
Because there's no way we can collect the other $700,000.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
I'll make sure the math.
Yes, and so I've already got in the next year's budget that I'm working on, I'm moving that money over to cash pay as much of it as I can. So I don't have to take out the debt, even though it's available to me. And then as the money comes in and I know I have cash on hand, I'm gonna buy that down so that I don't have to use the debt.
Go ahead. And I'm not gonna run you through all of the machinations of how we build the rates and everything else. I'm gonna take you to the bottom line, and this is the wrong slide.
That was the next one. Oh, yes, yeah.
21. This is should be 23. And we handed out corrected slides.
The lines are right, the dates are wrong.
The lines are right, the dates are wrong, and that's my fault. And I'm taking out to the woodshed on that. Now, what you see here is just a reference line. This is a Community Development Block Grant Program. It's an affordability index. It's a number that the federal government puts out to say what is an affordable sewer rate. And it's 1.25% of median household income. Your median household income here is $55,000. I've got the number. So it translates to $56 a month. So in theory, if we take this static line, this growing your rate today at $54.12 for a single family home, growing at 3.5%, which is our blended rate of increase over the next 5 years. If your median household income does not go up over that time, your rates would by that definition be unaffordable. You might even be able to get grant money. And once again, she's an artist at that. So there's an opportunity there. $64 today. I've got folks in Oregon now, communities that are over $100 right now on sewer rates. There are many communities that are in the 90s right now. So you are really pretty fortunate that you've got a modest rate. And based on inflation that we saw today, the producer price index was at 7% published last week, and we've still got the consumer price index at roughly 7.9, roughly 8%. We're requesting that you consider a 3.5% per year rate increase. So I think you guys are doing a great job.
And that monthly cost, look at the difference between those numbers. What's a cup of coffee cost at a coffee bistro place?
So
You're talking basically the difference of a cup of coffee per month in rate increases as you go along each year. And we've been able to keep that down to the 3.5% and that low because of the SDC's work you did and the other work that we did internally. So that we had.
and you're still spending $11.5 million on projects over this time frame. So you're getting your projects built too and funded.
I don't understand. So it says amount to be financed is 2.6 and then 6.6, the slide before. So then we end up financing, but the SDCs cover all of that, so then people will only get a rate increase of $10 over that time period. That's the estimate.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. That's exactly right. So there's the benefit, what's going on here is you got the benefit of debt, rather than cash paying. If you had to pay that cash, and we had the massive rate increases. So what we're doing is we're taking out debt, spreading it over 20 years. So that levelizes that rate increase. That's really what we're talking about.
But it still says we are taking out debt.
Oh, yes,
Right?
no
So
question.
That's not going to cause an increase more than this. small
Not
amount.
more than that line. That's
Okay.
correct. That's exactly correct. Go ahead.
I have a facilities question. We're still using sewer lagoons. Does it still exist? How much life is there in those
20 years
from now?
from now,
Okay,
with the existing upgrades. One of the projects that's not on there is the chlorine contact basin, but that's actually quite a ways down the road in the period. The headworks, the screening, that helps improve your efficiency of your plant. The removal of the biosolids gives you capacity for biosolids over the long term. And the aeration helps with the breakdown. in the
and
CO2.
this
So
is
you're-
all work that has been done on a regular maintenance schedule.
The biosolids removal, I can't find any records that it's ever been done.
The reason I ask is because I remember from a number of years ago having similar information in front of us, not this future proof,
Mhm.
but the comment being made then that the sewer lagoons had about 10 years of life in them. So there has been then either upgrades or improved technology that allows the life to be extended another 20.
Yeah, so they're regularly maintained as far as upgrading the riprap that you see along the side. That's to keep erosion from happening from wind waves. The biosolids haven't been removed in a long time, so cleaning those out actually helps breathe more life into the lagoons. And then putting the diffused aeration in there basically helps the bacteria, the bugs work more efficiently, so they clean the water better. And as you have more water coming in with growth, you want them to be as efficient as possible.
I've watched those bugs breach. That's kind of weird. Is the nutria problem gone?
As far as I know, yes, I haven't had any reports from our staff. There was some, I guess, a few years ago, but that hasn't
They're in the
been.
lagoons or they're in Ash Creek?
They were over in lagoons and in Ash
And
Creek.
they tunnel between the lagoons and it mixes the water that shouldn't be mixed.
So would it be fair to characterize this as what you put together is a very conservative plan moving forward on how to handle our wastewater issues for the next 20, with a focus on the next 5, with very conservative income levels and but still accomplishing things. And so things could get better depending upon growth, development, and the rate that it comes about. But it's very most unlikely that it's going to get any worse than what we have. Worse is the wrong word, any weaker than what's being presented. So it can get better from here, but this is probably the most conservative approach. Would that be a fair characterization? Thank you.
Sorry, drill down one more question.
Yeah.
Our 20-year plan for the $39 million for the sewer system, everything, is to maintain what we have for the next 20 years and to with the dredging and all of that stuff, or at the end of 20 years, do we need a completely new sewer system because the lagoons only last 20 years or?
No, so the 20-year plan has all of the projects. They recommend replacement of sewer lines, upgrades to lift stations. Some of our lift stations don't have dedicated generators to them, so adding generators, controls, putting in an additional force main from 9th Street over to the Lagoon lift station, one of the projects, and then doing the treatment plant upgrades that will allow that plant to run for the next 20 years. And then we'll end up doing another wastewater master plan. The intent is to have that plant running with all of those upgrades for the 20-year period before we get into a cycle with DEQ and EPA where they've changed the rules, increased the requirements, and then you're gonna have to do upgrades in the future. It's not.
Because those
set-
lagoons need to be replaced roughly in 20 years.
Eventually you will probably have to go to a mechanized plant.
That's what I was gonna point out is, if you look at the history of the Clean Water Act, there's anti-backsliding laws in there. You might be aware of that. Where you can never go to a less efficient technology. And what the thinking is now is as we go forward, you're going to be pushed toward best available technology as new permits come down the road. So within the next 20 years, you're probably gonna go to a biomembrane. Ever heard of biomembrane system? That's probably where you're heading, but not, we don't know that now. And you're at least one more master plan away from that. So the bottom line is you're 20 years of this technology.
Yeah, the fact that the master plan came back and DEQ approved it and said, you can do upgrades to your lagoon and remain in compliance. When I got here, I was like, hooray. Because the last place that I worked for, they were working on a sequencing batch reactor, which is about a 30-foot tall concrete box with a whole bunch of pumps and other stuff, and they were in a lagoon. But they couldn't meet the permit requirements without going to that new mechanized system. So this is the least cost as far as treating wastewater that we can go right now, and eventually sometime down the road, DEQ and EPA is going to require everybody to go to that next level. And it's just natural because you're going to continue to have growth. And lagoons work really great for smaller populations if you have the ground to do them. If you're constrained and you don't have enough ground where you can add additional lagoons, you're in trouble and you get switched over. If you grow really fast and get a large population, lagoons won't handle it. You have to go to the mechanized tank because they treat the water faster than a lagoon.
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Counselor.
One question is, if we approve this, well, I don't know if we're voting on this, but if we,
You're not,
if we're looking at this rate increase here, Independence pays our water and sewer on the same bill.
Right.
So our water bill, have we looked at the increase we would anticipate our people paying in the future on that? Is that, that's something we're gonna do in the future?
That's in the
But
future.
do we have any foresight on how much that increase is gonna be?
No, because it's just like, remember when I talked to you at the beginning of the completion of the wastewater master plan? One of the questions was, what are the rates gonna be? And it's the same question. Every place I work, what are the rates gonna be? You can't get to the rates until you adopt the master plan, which sets your CIP. You adopt the SDCs. And then from there, you do the rates. It's a 3-step process. So we won't know what the water is gonna be until probably a year from now. Because the water master plan is supposed to be adopted in March. If we stay on our timeline, then we have to start working on the water SDCs. That's going to be a methodology update, just like the last one. So we have to advertise, we have to let the Home Builders Association know. And there's a period that we have to run that out. Once that's done and locked in, then we'll start the water rates. And then we'll know what our water
Why don't
rate.
you go to
increase is
that
gonna
next
be.
slide with.
My only concern is that and people have been talking to me about this for years is I know this doesn't seem like a huge increase, I think because it's a cup of coffee to some people, but this is 5 to 7.5% of their monthly income for some people. And so I want to approach this with as much caution as I can.
Well done.
Of
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
we're going to be affecting people's pocketbooks.
And what this slide shows you is, right to your point, is you can't look at this in a vacuum and say, okay, just a sewer bill, everybody happy, cup of coffee, walk away. Water, sewer, stormwater, transportation, in many communities, a general services fee. And of course, they pay cable and they have internet and everything else. So we're very sensitive to that. But what you're seeing here is, in addition to the colors, I wanted to show what the trend of other communities are doing here. What we're talking about is, here's Independence, the total monthly bill for water and sewer and stormwater. We're talking about going right now from 122 to 124. several communities above, several below. What I want to talk about is this tan box. What's been happening and the trend is going on now in most communities in Oregon is a public safety fee, a general services fee, and a general governance fee. And we're seeing it a lot in these communities. You can see, look at Corvallis. I mean, theirs is I think they're over $15 where they're paying for police. They're paying for their general fund. They're paying for discounts that you give to seniors. The dirty little secret about giving discounts to your seniors is you got to pay for it because it's a zero-sum game, right? The costs don't go away. So if you get a discount, somebody else has got to pay for it. That trend is happening. And like in your community, a library fee, a museum fee, this could potentially be coming your way because there's no other pockets to go to. And last I heard, you don't control your property taxes, so you cannot change that. Mayor, you've been griping about this for years. There's no more pockets to go to. You don't have local control. So what most communities, or not most, many communities are going to the fee-based, where, you know, policing is now a utility. General government's projects, swimming pools and parks. A lot of that yellow is for, or that brown is for parks. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. This is really fresh data as to what everybody else is paying. And the bottom line is your utility bills are kind of right in the middle of the people that we chose. They're not everybody, but it's a snapshot of what's going on in your area. And that's all we've had for today. Thank you.
Additional questions for the presenters?
I have two. Is there a MyNet fee associated with it? No, there's no fee on our current bill that covers a MyNet service.
So on water, MyNet,
I can answer that.
Yeah.
Gloria can answer that. No, there's not.
Right.
We are not assisting, we are no longer assisting MyNet in paying their debt service, because we are not utilizing water revenues.
yeah, that's about.
And then my second question is on slide number 3, it says that we have a net principal balance of 6.7 million. And it says no payments have been made yet.
That's on the
Do we-
2017 clean water
Right.
loan, right?
Do we have a payment schedule for that?
It has not closed yet, so no, we do not.
So that is not included in the debt.
Yes, it is. It's been included in the rate profile.
Estimated it.
I estimated it, and we dialed it in. We know the terms of the loan, so I created an amortization schedule and then included it in the rate model. So it's in that rate profile, 3.5%. We're paying that loan out.
So it was in our budget and our whole thing. The budget we just read and looked at for what we're gonna have for this.
In
coming
the
year.
audit report?
Yes.
Yes, it is in there.
I have a couple questions about 2 of the other cities that are on here. And you may or may not know the answer. Does Monmouth subsidize any of their utility fees because they own an electric utility?
I don't know. That's come up before, and I just don't know.
And by the same kind of thing, Dallas, I think they're looking at some serious infrastructure replacement in Dallas.
They are.
So that is the before picture that we're looking at for Dallas.
Right, and they've gone through this, like, I did the rates in Dallas, so look at the red bar there for sewer, for wastewater. About 10 years ago, they had to completely replace their wastewater treatment plant. It was they went from like $18 a month for sewer to like 40. And they were upset that the constituency was not, why didn't we plan for this? And I know that they're trying to do more business planning like Kenna wants us to do here. Where we've got a 5-year business plan and we can predict what our costs are gonna be, so we don't have any of these odds. But I can't speak to what big nuts they've got coming, but we all do, everybody does.
I think that was one of the things that, from talking to mayors around the state, that it depends where you are in the cycle, because
Right. Yes.
I've had to listen to mayors talk about, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's now time. And so, anyway, are there other questions? Because I know we do have another work session to follow. So And I know that if you have additional questions that come up, as you're noodling, 1-800 call Gerald.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk to you later about visitor and travel possibilities with the sewer lagoons.
Say.
Hey, there's nothing more.
Public Works Tour. Tourist destinations.
There we go. Well, we'll see about scheduling that.
Or they could, if you think we loved them in there and we went on.
There you go. We'll talk about taking a public utilities tour. So we're gonna keep us moving here, and I think we're going to little housing needs analysis, and is that our famous friend Fred?
Yep, that's,
I like the alliteration there.
did you want,
Yes. Planning commission people, please join us at the table. Mayor. She wants you to kind of hold for a second. She's. Well, we have people moving up. I showered today, so please, somebody can sit next to me. There you go. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. See you later.
Thank you.
We're waiting here for a little bit, so. Punish yourself. So.
What? It's in the front of the.
well, yeah, so we, you know, like, we most of the time, you should get out of there. You know, we'll have really nice, so like, and they said, right, well, and, oh, it's cute, little, so the driver, right here, and so, now that you can see the driver, you know, and really,
Between regular car and CEO, you're asking, yeah. Is that what it is? I don't know. Got it.
Yeah.
I used to be able to, I used to have a stroker's license.
Yeah.
Yeah, a long time ago. Well, but yeah. I think. Yeah, well. Yeah, they don't. Yeah. But, you know, if everybody gets the price. Well,
But there are ways to know what day of those.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to do that because I have no building other than my garage. And then, are these people watching? Are we ready? Ready? You ready? Karen, you good?
I'm good.
Okay, we're gonna get started. This is housing needs analysis and our famous friend Fred. I just love the alliteration there.
Very nice, I like it. So yeah, this is just essentially continuing the housing needs analysis. As you'll remember, we started off, we did some initial surveying, we looked at some data associated with the city in terms of how much land do we have, all of that sort of stuff. And now they're coming back with the second phase of the project, where we're gonna, again, go out to the community with some outreach, try and present some of their findings to folks in the community and all of that sort of stuff. So they're here to present tonight. And yeah, if you folks have any questions, I think feel free to just sort of type up. That'd be great. So go for it.
Good evening and welcome to Independence in our Planning Commission and our City Council.
Great. Yeah, thank you for having us and staying even later for a second work session. I saw, Karen, you had the slide deck we shared earlier pulled up. I can pull it up on my end, or were you just?
Oh, go ahead and pull it up on your end.
Okay, sure. Yeah, happy to do that. Great. Well, I'll just do that. I offered and was halfway prepared. Oh, I don't think actually I'm able to share my screen with this.
Let me do that. We do this real fast.
Great.
And this is. Okay, you should be able to now.
Great, thank you. Oops, now I have to do my part of the job. Great. Okay. Okay, assuming you can all see this slide deck here now. And yeah, so we are coming back to you after our first presentation, which was essentially kind of just initial update on the findings we had done with the housing needs projection, which is essentially, looking at the population growth and changes in demographics for the City of Independence, and using those estimates that have been generated by the Population Research Center here at PSU to help with estimating what is the current housing need just based on that. From that, we also did a buildable land inventory, which looked at just the actual available vacant or partially vacant land that wasn't restricted by, certain like environmental features that was able and available for building new housing. And then we brought those together with conducting a residential land needs analysis, which then kind of summarized, based on population, demographic changes, and what is available as far as buildable land that's partially or fully vacant, what could we kind of estimate or project as far as the distribution of different housing types, and kind of carrying forward what is generally a very good distribution of housing that Independence has continued to charter. So tonight, we're going to update you with just kind of a reminder of community survey findings or key findings from that. And I guess I could advance to this next slide. There we go. So just kind of remind you about what is the purpose and, of a housing needs analysis. What were some key highlights from the community survey that was conducted late last year, and then pivot to the actual housing needs analysis key findings and the draft strategies that come from just understanding what is the housing need, what is also the community's concerns about housing, and how can we address those with changes to zoning or land use. So that's what we'll do today. And just like Fred had mentioned, please just kind of pop in if you have questions or would like any kind of clarification or time for discussion at any point. So here we go. Okay, so just as a reminder, housing needs analysis, this is a process that is kind of your first step when you're trying to understand and plan for the future of your city's housing needs and stock. So first, it starts with just getting an understanding of what is available in the current zoning and supply. And then trying to examine, what are there kind of deficiencies in certain types of housing, especially based on what the projections for population and growth look to be. And then what are the key barriers as far as, how do we reconcile, population growth and needs and concerns with the community right now as far as affordability, for example, which is no surprise. And what can be done with land use and zoning and regulatory type of strategies to help with facilitating and supporting production of housing that meets the needs of your community and looking forward in the next 20 years. So this is something else to emphasize about a housing needs analysis, is that it's kind of step one before, actually implementing policies and strategies. And that's something that might come up in our conversation throughout tonight, is that our focus for this project and this type of analysis is to just really get the assessment. The next phase would be something like a housing production strategy or a housing implementation plan, which would be the more tangible, concrete actions that the city would take after this housing needs analysis process has been adopted and approved by City Council. All right. So quickly, just kind of to remind ourselves about when we ask the community, what are the most important housing related issues that you see for Independence? It's not really a surprise that most people identified housing affordability as one of the predominant issues. It outweighed, other things such as quality of housing or even, options for first-time home buyers. But related to affordability was also the lack of choices for different housing types, whether you're, a renter or a first-time home buyer or prospective home buyer. Oh, and sorry, other context about this survey. So this survey was open for about 6 weeks. We collected about a little over 200 complete responses between English and Spanish. And yeah, those are just kind of like the high level stats on that. So we asked residents in this first survey to just kind of give us an understanding of how, first off, are you aware or have any kind of concerns about housing? And we just to kind of get that temperature check and confirm that, the issues, especially as you move down the line, that you're getting kind of community and public support with what council and planning commission want to charge forward with in subsequent phases. And overall, between all respondents, there was, strong general concern about the community being able to meet its housing needs. So I think that that's just basically helping us confirm that this is an issue that is relevant to residents, and that it's not going to be, it's a priority, and that the city is able to be responsive to the community if they take action in this way. All right, as far as, basic kind of initial ideas for how the housing issues in Independence can be solved, we asked this question: what are some things the city can do? And among the options available, the top two housing need strategies were encouraging smaller and more affordable housing types, as well as the idea of subsidizing the development of income restricted affordable housing. So kind of capital A affordable housing, as well as creating kind of, naturally occurring more affordable housing, or housing that can be more affordable compared to, your standard single family large lot type of housing. So this is just kind of a reminder or setting the context of what the public is interested in or is kind of feeling right now. And like Fred alluded to, as far as this second round of engagement that will happen in the spring, we'll be presenting this information back to the public. Essentially, this is what we heard, and asking them to give more input on, what are some solutions and what feels more palatable for you as far as solutions that the city can take. So that'll be something that we'll be able to be, summarized and be packaged with the final housing needs analysis report, for your final review and hopefully adoption. Any questions or anything that I covered here that you wanted to discuss?
Councilor Court, go ahead.
Yeah.
We're starting to focus a little bit on seniors in our community and making sure that our community is livable for seniors. And Becky and I were just chatting about seniors are typically on a fixed income. And so any changes to the market clearly has an impact on them. Was there any discussion or were there any survey responses that you got back that informed on senior issues at all? Did you get any demographic information to identify that they are seniors?
Yeah, so one of the options as far as kind of what are certain strategies or priorities for specific types of housing included, identifying locations and places for older adult housing and senior housing. That did not rise to the top compared to these issues here. However, that doesn't mean that it's not still on the community's radar. And I think that might be something that would be worth following up on in a second round of the survey and engagement that we do.
I think we need to work on some communication strategies for seniors.
Alex, I had a question of how that tracked the survey data, especially around most important housing related issues, I assume that's almost universal to Oregon, right? Like or the Valley, like I can't imagine, or maybe it is unique to Independence in terms of what the concerns were. Or, I mean, does it track pretty close sort of everywhere, or is there any outliers from the information that you saw for our community?
Yeah, great question. No, you're right. This is a universal kind of experience for all cities in Oregon. So there wasn't necessarily an anomaly. Part of what we do especially at this phase of kind of understanding cities' housing need is just, a component of both kind of educating the public, bringing and understanding kind of the level of awareness, and then, using that to help kind of move to the next step of like, okay, so you do agree, we all agree that there is an affordability crisis, or however you want to characterize that. What are some solutions that feel like, that you could live with or that you could see happening in your own neighborhood? So I think that part of what our approach with surveys, and especially keeping it at this kind of higher level questions, is that this is our first and might be the first time that we kind of have a conversation with the public about this in a way, but we want to, make sure we're not making any assumptions about what the most important issue is here.
Mr. Joe.
I just want to clarify, we're talking about purchasing housing, not renters, right? This is strictly purchasing.
No, this actually included questions for both if you are a renter or a homeowner or a potential homeowner. We heard from a good share, roughly, I guess the distribution of folks who identified as renters who took the survey versus homeowners was similar to kind of the breakdown of residents in the city of Independence. So roughly representative. And yes, it was asking questions no matter what your kind of housing needs or, what you're looking for.
Councilor Roden.
I think we need to do a better job at the next survey of making sure we have a sample that's larger than roughly 2% of our population. So we need to do something that really gets out there and gets communication out there so that I don't feel this represents our community well at all. When we have such a small sample size from both the English and Spanish speaking populations when we definitely have more than 17, Spanish speaking homes in this community. We need to do a better job at getting a better in-depth analysis, because this to me is meaningless. So I would love to help on the next round of surveys if we can help to make sure that we get a better collection of thoughts and ideas on this process. Because right now, if we continue on this route with 2% of our community participating in it, I don't feel we're actually representing our community well at all.
Counselor Morton.
And I want to echo that, what Councilor Roden just said. I know it's hard to get quantity, but I think the amount of surveys that we have also needs to reflect the cultural ratios in the community. And 17 Hispanics versus 169 Caucasians is not reflective of our community at all. Okay, Spanish speaking. So I'd like to see a ratio that is more accurate to what our population is.
Okay, and Commissioner?
I also want to, piggyback with the comments that were just said right now by the counselors, but also, is there an omission of error for that third question that only appeared on the English survey, or is that intentional?
That was not intentional. That was an oversight. Yeah.
Okay. Counselor.
I just had a question on that third question. Funding the construction of infrastructure. That's saying they want the city to pay for it, but the city kicks that back to the developers. The homeowners are going to pay it one way or the other anyway. Not really sure what that question is designed to illustrate.
Yeah.
A follow-up to that. I think that's a little bit of a misleading question. If you ask somebody, hey, would you like somebody else to help fund the water, sewer, roads? The answer is, well, yeah, of course they would, without the understanding that that would likely have increases to your point of like, it's gonna show up someone.
Okay, so you've gotten a little bit of input. You want to, should we keep moving forward on this?
Sure, absolutely. I think all of those are really great and valid points. I think it's a good opportunity to kind of make a plug that for this second round of engagement, just earlier today, Fred, Sean, and I were talking about, the possibility of having, a public workshop and how great it would be to have folks from council or planning commission participate in that, to just help elevate kind of the issue, the meeting, and be able to talk with community members to hear directly from them about, what are their concerns and, what do they see as potential solutions. So if that's something that is of interest to you, you can let Fred know, and we can make sure to keep your schedule or just, in the loop of when we start to nail down that date. Great. And I think something else, just a comment is, these types of surveys, of course, they're not by any means conducted with a scientific rigor. However, the purpose of them is to really, first, like I said, kind of play the role of helping educate people on what the issue is, what are kind of just generally the realm of options that have to be decided on. And like your point that was made just a moment ago, there's some serious trade-offs when you start to identify solutions that possibly could happen. And that's really where the second round of engagement and future engagement related to, increasing and meeting the needs of the housing priorities in the community will have to happen. So appreciate those comments. All right, I'll keep moving. We'll talk now about just some key findings from our HNA report, and I'll pass it over to Jamin to help cover this section.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Sounds like it, yeah. Great, so my name's Jamin Kimmel. I wasn't able to attend the last meeting of the Planning Commission City Council, and so unlike Ayano, new face to you, but I've been acting as the principal in charge for this project, and I'm a partner with Cascadia Partners. And So yeah, I mean, our goal today for this section of the presentation is to give you a summary of what the draft housing needs analysis report says today. And as a reminder, the housing needs analysis report is really a summary in itself of 3 technical memorandums that were sent to you in a previous meeting. So that's the buildable land inventory, the housing needs projection, and the residential land needs assessment. And so what we're trying to do here is sum up what are the most important findings that are affecting, 1, the housing needs projection, and 2, our recommendations for strategies the city can consider to try to address their housing needs. And I would emphasize that as part of the HNA process in Oregon and under the statewide land use goals and our way of doing land use planning in Oregon, the housing needs analysis is primarily a land use planning process. And so our primary focus is on the zoning and comprehensive plan of the city, making sure that is aligned with your housing needs in the long term. There are a whole bunch of other strategies that that are unrelated to your zoning regulations that may also affect housing development and housing affordability. And we largely don't cover those in this part of the process. So our major focus now is really just on your zoning designations and your long-term land use plans. So with that context in mind, we to make a connection here to the community engagement, the survey is one input into us preparing a housing needs analysis for you. Other inputs are demographic data, technical analysis of the data from the Census and American Community Survey, and sources from the city itself. And so these things are coming together here in preparing the key findings of the analysis. So if you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Ayano. So kind of first top level findings. So we're really looking at future growth in Independence. So we do planning for future housing need. We're basing it on population growth that is projected by the Population Research Center at Portland State University. And so the current forecast, which is what's required for all cities in Oregon to use when they're doing their planning, is that the city will add about 7,400 new residents in the next 20 years. So that's a significant growth, considering your current population just reached about 10,000 in 2021. And so based on that population growth, and household sizes and vacancy rates that we build in assumptions for, we estimate there's a need for about 2,300 housing units to accommodate that population growth for the next 20 years. So that 2,300 is the key big figure of the number of housing units that your zoning and your urban growth boundary needs to accommodate. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So now we start to think about what are some of the.
We have a question here. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Damon. The previous slide talks about accommodating for the next 20 years. What about our gap today? We have a gap today of housing. How do we address that? Where's that included in this analysis?
Mm-hmm. So the gap today, a way of thinking about that term that's kind of used, it's underproduction. So there's historical underproduction of housing, and so there's a shortage today. And we in completing an HNA follow the current kind of prescriptions of the statewide land use planning program and the rules that it prescribes on how cities should plan for their housing need. And as of today, the state doesn't have a adopted methodology to plan for underproduction historically. The method is to plan for your future growth and to assume that your current housing stock is meeting the needs of your community. The state has recognized that that's probably not a sound methodology, that there is a housing shortage today, and we need to account for that underproduction. And so while we don't apply that to this process, the state currently is reconsidering the process for projecting housing need. And the state legislature right now is reviewing a new methodology that would be done at a regional scale and not a city by city scale, and also would account for things like both historical underproduction as well as current homeless population. And so it's a little more nuanced intake that will probably end up resulting in a projection for a need for greater number of housing units over time. And so right now we kind of can't try a plan for that. We wouldn't recommend it because it's not really adopted in the state statute or state rules to do that. But we recognize that that is a part of the context here, is that 2,300 housing units may serve that new growth, but you may need more than that to serve your to make up for the shortage in the supply today.
Thank you.
Keep rolling.
Rather than talking about an aggregate amount of units, I think it would make more sense to talk about it as a deficit in terms of a negative percentage, and what would be that negative percentage going into the future.
So yeah, that's what so what it's called is the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis methodology going forward does, is it looks at your current population compared to your housing stock and your job growth compared to your housing stock, and estimates the deficit in either the percentage or the number of units that the city has underproduced historically. And so we don't have that form of analysis for this project today. So I can't say for certain what the current deficit is in the number of units. And we haven't really looked at it with that lens. But we're working under what the kind of state guidelines are today for if you're going to make zoning changes and going to make potentially urban growth boundary changes, that's not really recommended as part of this process. The state requires you to use certain methodology.
Okay, keep going.
Mhm.
All right, we can.
So now we're shifting to, okay, what are some of the demographic trends and factors that affect housing need? So not just the overall number of units, but what kinds of units and what unit sizes. And so we look at a few different key kind of demographic variables here. One of them is household size, and Independence has a fairly high household size at 3.29 people per household. That's increased over the last decade. It's higher than the county average and the state average. And
why there is an increase like that? Is that increase due to larger families, or is it due to the high cost of housing? And more people are not moving out of their folks' houses because they can't afford rent or to buy a house, or more people are sharing housing because they can't afford it to be on their own. I mean, you look at that, and there's lots of different reasons that growth could be, and that would be something to take into account when we want to talk about what kind of housing we want to have.
So, right, and this is why we put this together with the median age, and the median age in Independence is also significantly lower. So what that tells us is that this is partially, at least, driven by more families with children either moving to Independence or forming an Independence over the last 10 years. And so your household size is going up probably primarily from that. Not to say it couldn't be in combination with what is called overcrowding, or what would be kind of bunking up in people who would normally want to have their own housing unit, or bunking up in the same household as a parent or friend or whatever it might be. So I think that's definitely a factor. But given the households, given the median age and the change in that over time, we think it's probably primarily because of the number of families in Independence. Families with children.
Could be college students looking. I mean, that's gonna lower your average due.
So Jamin, something, I've had recent conversations with the school district and they're doing a facility plan right now. And so they've had their demographers in. And they've been looking at these issues and their staff is saying, their demographers are saying, the number of kids are flatlining in our community, and that the numbers in the past have reflected larger families, but families are significantly smaller. Now, I'm not going to go into back and forth there, but I think it would be very helpful in this to connect up with the school district and what, since they've spent a pretty penny on it, also on what the population is, and that many of the people that are moving in now are coming from other places, and they're, they may be dual income but no kids or older, and that would definitely skewer these numbers, because these are historical numbers for us, but they may not be holding true. And I thought it would, and I've actually pushed back on the school district, and they pushed back pretty hard with some statistics. And Fred, I think you probably heard a little bit of this too also.
I have, yeah.
So I think it'd be worth having a conversation. And I know Councilor Roden has a question.
Well, one is, well, my house doubles this average right here. I just don't see that there's a problem with 3.5 people in a house, especially when there's so many kids in our community. And if we're going to go to the school district and ask, why are we flatlining? We also have to look at the mass exodus of students from public schools into private and other types of schools before we decide that the youth population in our community has decreased. Does that make sense? Yes, it does.
We did hear, I will just add, we did hear from a realtor who's selling real estate as part of a project in the community, and he says that the vast majority of people that they are selling to are retirees. So that in part is what the school district is seeing. Whether that completely holds true, I don't know. But I mean, there are changes in the demographics that we're hearing about, and that we're seeing, yeah.
The younger families can't afford to be here. I mean, from their slide, the 74% lower income households, they can't afford to live here. I mean, this is something I've been talking about for a long time. We're enticing people with more money to come here, and the younger people, maybe less income. I mean, yeah, it's what are we wanting for the city, I guess, because people are not going to afford to live here. They can't afford it right now. They're never going to be able to purchase a home. But I mean, I like independence. I like the diversity and independence, and at this rate, it's going to be rich people.
Right.
People in the upper, but really the upper, not the upper middle, but the upper, that's what we're gonna have here.
And I think what you've just stated is like the fundamental reason why this whole housing needs analysis is really important. It's like, okay, I mean, because I don't think that any of us, I think that all of us in here like independence being kid friendly community. I think we all like independence being young and vibrant and all that sort of stuff. And I think that exactly what you're saying, that if the demographics shift, we kind of lose some of that.
Well, I mean, people are saying they want smaller housing. By far, affordability is the biggest issue. There's a lot of younger people with bigger families. 74% lower incomes. I mean, we definitely need rentals, but like affordable rentals. So I think that's what everybody, well, that's what I assumed before we even started this. So there's just people doubling up, living with family, friends, just to be able to afford to live here.
Well, or just having roommates. I mean, I know that was the case for my son.
You know,
Set up
but
where you
never having the
shared a
opportunity to work
townhouse.
from home, it is just getting worse. I don't know how we stop that from happening, but yeah, independence isn't going to be independence for much longer. I mean, it's gonna be completely different. When you look around, so.
I'm gonna try to keep us moving here. These are important conversations, so I'm not getting any of the, I just want to make sure that, that we cover the material. I'm gonna let you keep going, Jamin.
Sure, yeah. So I'm going to go through just a couple more of the demographic, variables that we're looking at that very much track with what you're talking about. But I think, with the bottom line here in terms of the housing needs analysis and land planning is the question of should you project a different mix of housing types in the future than you have today? So that's where we're headed. And that's really where the rubber hits the road with your zoning. And so we'll just kind of keep that in mind as we're looking at this. So Independence is a higher share of lower income households compared to the county and the region. And so the median income in Polk County is about 80,000 compared to 65,000 in Independence. If you look at what qualifies based on federal definitions of low income, about 80%, or excuse me, 3 of 4 households, about 75% of households in Independence could qualify as low income. And so, among the region, the city does have many current households that are lower income. And if you earn less than 80% of the median income today, it's unlikely you're able to find a market rate housing unit, whether that's a rental or for sale, more likely a rental, that is affordable to you. You're probably cost burdened. And so you're probably spending more than 30% of your income on rent. I think if you go to the next slide, that's the finding there is that renters are significantly more likely to be cost burdened. There is some homeowners that are cost burdened in the community. And overall, about 1 in 5 residents in Independence, so 20% are cost burdened. But those renters tend to have lower incomes and they can't afford market rate units. So there is a need for that affordable rental housing. So I say affordable broadly, that could mean income restricted rental housing. It's actually, the rent is restricted to be affordable to someone in a lower income. That's subsidized usually by combination state, federal, local agencies. That also could mean market rate units that are lower cost and meeting needs that are unmet today. So it's a combination of those, but we know that's a need. Similarly, in terms of affordability on the homeownership side, median home values have been increasing, and no one, I think, in this virtual room here would dispute that fact if you've been following the market the last few years. And so Independence is not in any way an exception to state and regional trends. You can see the percent change in median home values between 2020 and 2022 is 16%. And the current median home value is around 380,000. And so when you look at those households that are what we would consider middle income, so between 80 and 120% of the median income, they could afford a home price between 110 to 189,000. With that median price at 380, it's, as when we look at the market as a snapshot in doing this analysis, there is no units available, for sale units available in that price range. And so there is a need for lower cost for sale housing for that income bracket of 80 to 120%, really your middle income households. And so looking at what kind of housing types may be more affordable to those, that income bracket. Go to the next slide. So here's where we get to the bottom line of the housing needs projection. And so when we look at this in terms of projecting your mix of housing types into the future, then we take into account those demographic trends we're seeing. And really, there's a mix of trends there. There's some trends that would support larger single-family detached houses continuing to be a need. A lot of families in the community. There's always a significant demand for single-family detached homes. We also see, though, that there's a need for rental units, and there's a need for more affordable forms of home ownership, so things like a townhome. And as we look at the existing housing stock, we came to the conclusion that your existing housing stock pretty well matches up to what we would project to be the need in the future. So we tend not to change the projected mix of housing types in the future, unless we have a really good reason that the demographic shifts are significant from what's today, or your housing mix is very out of sync with the housing need today. We don't find that. And part of the reason for that is that the city has produced a lot of multifamily units, townhomes over the last 10 years. So about 60% of the total multifamily units in the city have been constructed in the last 10 years. So there's been a lot of new apartments being built, some also probably townhomes being built during that time. And so we think as long as that trend continues, then the city would be able to meet this, the future need for those townhomes, plexes, multifamily. So the housing types that aren't single family detached, basically. Go to the next slide. So then the next step is we have a projection of your housing types that are needed. And so now we compare that to your buildable land and what the zoning is in various buildable parcels throughout the city. And so I think we walked through this in the previous presentation. We'll go through it in detail. But the snapshot is that there are certain ways of determining whether a land is considered buildable. Needs to be either vacant or partially vacant, needs to be unconstrained by environmental features in Independence, that's primarily wetlands and floodplains. And so we remove that, we get to an estimate of what your net buildable acres is in the city. Go to the next slide. And so our estimate is that Independence is about 367 acres of land available. So buildable land that is vacant or partially vacant, unconstrained, and in residential zones, residential or commercial zones that allow for residential. The makeup of the zoning of that buildable land is heavily weighted towards the mixed residential zone, so the MX zone. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that implies for your ability to meet your future housing needs. I'm going to go to the next slide. So if we convert that amount of capacity in buildable acres to housing unit capacity, we do that by considering the density of unit housing that's allowed under the zoning, and make some assumptions about what's realistic for the market to deliver in terms of densities of new housing. And so we estimate there's a overall capacity for about 2,800 housing units within the city's current urban growth boundary. So this includes properties that are outside the urban growth or outside of the city boundaries, but within the urban growth boundary. You can see that most of those 2,800 units are in that mixed residential zone. And so there's primarily areas on the south side of the city that are slotted for growth outside of the city boundaries in the UGB. Good portion of it is part of Southwest Independence concept plan. You can go to the next slide. So comparing that overall capacity based on your buildable land to your projected housing need, so bringing back in that number of 2,312 units, there is a surplus of capacity over the next 20 years. So this is a key finding, because what this tells us is that the city doesn't have, while it's growing fast, it also has a fairly large UGB area. And we don't project that there is a strong justification for expanding your UGB in order to meet your housing need. Based on your current zoning, the amount of buildable land you have, there's not a good rationale for expanding the urban growth boundary. That's overall an overall kind of perspective. So there's a surplus of about 500 units of capacity. Go ahead and go to the next slide. But then when we break down that capacity by housing type, that's where we see that there's a deficit of capacity for certain housing types. And so we make a projection about the kind of housing that is likely to be built in each zone, and based on the housing types that are allowed and the densities that they're allowed at within each zone, total that up to get an estimate of the capacity for each type. And so you can see that there's a pretty significant surplus of capacity for single family detached housing, capacity about 2,100 units compared to the estimated demand or a need for 1,300 units. And then there's a slight deficit of land for townhouses and plexes and multifamily units, somewhere in the range of 130 to 180 units for those types. So that's a key finding, because what that tells us is, while there's not a need to expand the urban growth boundary to meet your housing needs, there may be a good rationale for making some shifts in your zoning to make sure there's enough capacity for those housing types. The next slide. And so this leads into the recommended strategies. So I'm going to go through these fairly quickly just to make sure we cover them and have time for some discussion. We can come back to any of these slides if you have questions. So there's 4 overall strategies here. They're kind of laid out in what we think is kind of priority order. So the first one here, I think, is probably the highest priority, is to identify some targeted areas in the zone, in the city, for rezoning to allow for higher density housing. And so what that would do is take some properties that are in potentially a lower density zone or even a mixed use or commercial zone and rezone them probably to the RH zone, which is the highest density zone allowed today. That is the zone that allows for both multifamily units and townhouses. So it's based on there's a need for additional capacity for those units in the long term. The RH zone does allow both of those at relatively high densities. And that's important because in today's context of high construction costs, high land costs, higher density makes it more likely that those units are going to be developed in the future. It's more economically feasible if it's allowed at a higher density that's enabled by the RH zone. So that's the first concept to think about, is what areas might be appropriate for some rezoning to try to create some more capacity for higher density housing. Go to the next slide. Another recommendation is to reconsider the housing mix requirement of the MX zone. So the MX zone, as I mentioned, has a lot of land in it that's buildable, but since 2013, the 94% of the housing that's been built in that zone has been single family detached. The zone is intended to require that 15% of the dwelling units be either multifamily or townhouses. But so far, that's what's been built as single family. I think future phases are slated to be multifamily or townhouses. But if you look back at the housing mix overall, that we project the city to need in the future, that mix of multifamily and townhouses should probably be closer to 25 to 30%, if to be in line with what the citywide mix of housing is needed. And so I think it's worth reconsidering that requirement and seeing whether it makes sense either to increase that housing mix requirement. So every development proposal that comes in would be required to designate that certain number of units, be either multifamily or townhouses, or rezone portions of the MX zone to specifically designate areas where multifamily or townhouse would be required. So that's second concept. Let's go to the third one here. So as we look at the RH zone, which allows for those multifamily and townhouse units, I think there's a couple of tweaks that could be made to the specific development standards in the zone to make sure that development that actually occurs in that zone would deliver on that need for the multifamily and townhouse units. One of those is a minimum density standard. Today, single-family housing, detached housing would be allowed in that zone. And so there's a risk that the small amount of land that is available for higher density housing would get consumed and built for lower density housing because there is nothing precluding that today. So one strategy many cities use is to set a minimum density standard. To say, well, you can have single-family detached housing, but it must meet a certain minimum density because we're trying to meet that need for smaller, more affordable homeownership options in this zone. Another thing to consider is actually an increase in the maximum density in RH zone, which today is set at 20 units an acre. Many more recent, even just 3-story kind of what we would typically call garden apartments can easily exceed that 20 units an acre. And so it's something to consider, is that may help to improve feasibility and make sure you're just, really maximizing on the capacity of the, buildable land that's in the RH zone. Okay. And last, as we looked at the city zoning, we always try to look at it with the lens of, are there any housing types that would fit the needs in the community that aren't allowed today? And generally, the city zoning allows for a pretty wide range of housing types. Everything that you can, the market usually is kind of, and builders are wanting to do. One kind of evolving type is cottage cluster housing. So the specific idea here is multiple smaller detached houses on the same site. And so they don't have their own frontage like a traditional single family house would have. They're usually oriented around kind of a common courtyard, and they're usually much smaller. So these are 1,000 to 1,500 square foot units. So this model is starting to kind of get legs, I guess, in the development community. People are finding ways to build this. It kind of combines the density of something like townhouses, but does it in a way that's detached units and a little more kind of open space and greenery on the site. And so it's something that kind of some buyers are finding attractive. I think there's been some actually in Monmouth that have been developed, those cottage clusters. We see as an opportunity here for the city to kind of define that housing type in the code and allow it explicitly.
Councilor Roden.
But the cottage clusters don't meet the needs of the families that we want to attract to independence. Like the families that are here, the families that we want to keep here, these cottage clusters are going to be for 2 family membered, families.
Like our older residents whose kids have moved out, who a townhouse doesn't work well necessarily because it's 2 stories and you have to navigate stairs. This gives you a single story, 1,000 to 1,500 square feet, which is actually larger than the home I live in. Single story with neighbors nearby in a lovely detached complex.
I'm glad that's what you need.
A
But
supportive
according
community, exactly.
to the study that you just put on our desk, our average household in our community is 3.5 people. So regardless of what she wants in her yard, what our community needs is family dwellings for 28-year-olds.
Well, I think it's about having that mix. So it's an average, right? So you have some people that only need this single resident in that unit, and then you have families that have 5, 7 people.
Right, but our
So
average
over
according to the
time,
study is
average-
28.
Right, but it's about creating a mix of housing types. So you have housing like the cottage clusters that are for single or
Smaller.
smaller, right? Like 1 or 2 people living in the home versus then having that appropriately clusters, but you then still preserve the land or the area for being able to develop. with larger residential, single family.
So what you're essentially saying here, Jamin, is that that there needs to be a variety of different kinds of housing in different places.
I have a follow-on question also.
Please do.
How do ADUs factor into this equation at all?
Yeah, they certainly do. And so I'd say the reason we focus on cottage cluster housing here is it's the type that's not currently defined and allowed in the code. So this is the opportunity for the city to diversify and provide another option that today wouldn't be clear if it was permitted or not. So a developer came along and wanted to propose a project like this, it wouldn't really fit in any of the current categories that the zoning anticipates. So it doesn't mean that is going to meet the majority or even a small minority of the city's housing need in the future. And so when you look at that projected housing need, 60% is still in just the traditional single family detached home. And that's the number we used to estimate the projected land need for that housing type. And we see there's a surplus for single family detached houses. There's plenty of land where that is available, where the zoning allows it. There are other factors that affect whether it actually gets built, but in terms of the zoning and the land supply, that is not a barrier to single family detached houses on larger lots or for larger homes in general. And so we focus on this because it's a piece of the puzzle that's missing now in the code. Now in ADUs, ADUs is also one of those types that is defined in the code today, is allowed, and we didn't find any significant barriers to ADU development in terms of the regulations. There are plenty of other challenges to homeowners building ADUs, financing them, things like that. The city doesn't have a lot of purview over, but in terms of the regulations, we didn't see a lot of barriers to them. So just kind of keep allowing it and hoping they get built.
Councilor Kerr, go ahead,
I
please.
think what Kathy said is actually on point, because we need to have options for empty nesters to downsize from their two-story homes and move into something more like this, freeing up a home from family. So I think we have to have those kind of options to plan for others' futures.
So I have a question, and it's about motivation. And I don't know if you'll have the numbers, and you don't have to, but as I understand, developers are building 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses because there's a lot of profit in that. And is there looking at profitability among different kinds of housing construction, because builders are in the business of being in business, and I'm wondering how that all figures in. Our cottage clusters are multifamily, are single family, are those equally profitable? I think you see where I'm going here.
Can I add on to that too, just a little bit, which is, think about how a lot of us jumped into the housing market. I started out with a house of 600 square feet that was far less in size than what really fit my family, but it fit our budget. And from there, we improved that one. We lived in it for a few years. We stepped up to the next level. And that size of housing is not being built right now to allow somebody to come into a starter home.
You're not gonna find a starter home for 600 and 700 square feet that people are gonna wanna move into to start a family.
Those are 1,000 to 1,500 are the numbers that I heard, not
So-
600 square.
I'm not trying to argue with you.
No, and I'm just pointing out.
You're getting hostile towards me. All I'm trying to say is, what this study said is that our average age is 28.
Yes.
There's 3.5
Average.
people
That
per
means
house.
between.
Our population is dwindling in our schools because we need to meet the needs of younger families. I'm not saying to disregard any other population. I think we should look at them all. But what I'm saying
And that's
is,
what we're trying to do.
if our population is trying to serve the 3.5% and the 28-year-olds, we need to look at it through the lens of a 28-year-old with 3.5 people in their family, not building a whole bunch of small dwellings.
His point was that there's a gap in the code to even allow this kind of stuff, and that this is not the silver bullet of by any stretch. It is an arrow and a quiver in terms of housing inventory that the city needs for the next however many years. And so I think that's, I get your point. His point is not that this is the only thing going forward. It's just that the planning commission needs to figure out some code revision, or do we need to add this classification to further allow sort of the diversity of mix?
And I
So,
appreciate that. And I think The challenge on us then going in the future is to define this so that people can visualize and see what it means to have cluster cottages in our community. Because when we define that and we survey that, I think people might give you a different answer than what people are expecting.
So Jamin, do you have any comment on this whole, did you want to add anything to what we were just talking about in the last minute or two? Or do you want to keep it moving?
I think I'd just make a general comment though. These are all great points you're making. And many of them apply more to the question of if you're writing code, it's the calibration of it. So we had a recommendation there of increasing maximum density in the RH zone. That speaks to improving development feasibility and whether the market will build the multifamily and townhouse units. We see there's an opportunity there to make it more attractive to build those through the code. So those kinds of details, I think, are really the next stage of your housing production strategy and your implementation phase of this work. But they're good to all bring up now. We don't really have the answers for all of those right now. But I would also just say that to reiterate that these strategies are looking to address the specific gaps and deficiencies we see. And so they're filling the holes, and it doesn't mean that there is not a continued need for example, just single family detached houses on larger lots. And those will continue to be a good majority of the city's housing production. There's just not a land supply or zoning barrier to those getting built today. There may be other barriers that the city might want to look at, but that's kind of not the thing holding back for those from getting built.
So as it gets later into the evening, do you want to talk about what the next steps are, what the next timeline is, what happens next, and then we can do a little figuring?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next steps with this is just kind of a reminder, orient ourselves to the timeline. We're kind of right here in January with this joint planning city council meeting. And so like we kind of alluded to earlier, we'll be bringing the findings from our initial survey and analysis back to the public, hosting a community meeting, and the city will be leading a survey with the community to kind of dive into getting input, particularly on solutions and kind of next steps with how the city can actually address the concerns and the housing need. So what that will look like is, early March to mid-April will be the time frame, like I said, spring, for conducting an in-person community meeting. We would welcome anyone from the Planning Commission or Council to help be part of that event. And from that workshop will be both an educational informing piece, right, and then kind of facilitating discussion. And that'll be carried forward in an online survey, collecting or wrapping that up by like mid-April, so that by hopefully May, we can bundle that all together, package it into a final HNA report for this council to approve and adopt. So those are the next steps for this project. And we're taking your feedback and comments here, and we'll be sure to kind of use those in our future engagement and kind of how we bundle this together.
So it kind of encapsulates some things that one thing I heard, and I'm asking staff for some help here, because I think there's some folks that like to give some input on how we reach out to people, and both from the Planning Commission and the council members. And if staff could figure out the best way for us to do that, and that might be one-on-one conversations. I'm not sure what the right thing is. I'm going to let you folks noodle on what the best way is, because I heard a variety of different things, and I heard it from a broad spectrum of folks that there's nothing wrong with getting lots of data. And I'm not sure what the critical number is that we need to, the more input we can have, and especially the diversity of income, not of income, of input from a broad spectrum. Because remembering that according to the Census Bureau, we are a community of 40% Latino. And so that doesn't mean all Spanish speakers, that's a different. But I think we need to make sure that we reach out and get lots. We have time to do that. The other thing I'd like to make a comment about, and I'm hoping that folks on the phone can do this, on the presentation. Recognizing that the legislature and the governor are there's legislation coming, there's executive action that is going on at the same time that we're going through this. This could have some really interesting implications for us on what the rules might be, what the rules might not be, what's taken away, what's added. And I think that we need to be aware from all sides that there could be some very significant changes in how things are going to be done. I don't know what those are. I've heard all sorts of rumors, and I'm not one to propagate rumorism. So I just wanted to draw that to our consultants' attention, and please note that. And I know Ken is going, yeah. And so, was this helpful, folks, for at least a starting place? I really want to thank our planning commission members for coming in on an extra day to do this.
And late.
And is this available? Did we record this or I don't know. I'm just asking.
I think so on YouTube.
Okay, because I'm hopeful that we can send it to our other planning commission members so they can see it with also the little part that says on YouTube, how to play it at 1.5. It goes a lot faster. That sound okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Does anybody want to go home and have dinner? Good night.
Right, well, thanks.
Thank you.
I know. That's.
All of Thank you. Thank you.
I did have another question.
Are we off, Karen?
I'm trying to get there.
Thank you.
How did people